When a man lives alone for too long, something changes deep within him. Quietly, slowly, silently. At first, the silence feels peaceful, like a break from the noise of the world. Nobody to disturb him, nobody to question him, nobody to interrupt his routine. But with time, that same silence becomes a companion, and sometimes a shadow. Living alone teaches a man to depend on himself. He wakes up, cooks his own meals, cleans his own space, pays his own bills, and handles his own problems. He becomes independent, strong, and emotionally disciplined. He learns to solve issues without seeking help, and that gives him a sense of pride. But there is another side, a softer side, that often goes unnoticed. When a man lives alone too long, he gets used to not being understood. He stops explaining himself. He stops sharing what's on his mind. His emotions become locked inside, protected, guarded. He becomes master of his own world, but the world outside becomes a little harder to connect with. He starts enjoying his own company so much that letting someone in begins to feel like a risk. The walls he built for safety become walls that keep others out. He forgets what it feels like to be genuinely cared for, to be asked, "How was your day?" and to answer honestly. Living alone too long teaches him peace, but it also teaches him distance. It gives him freedom, but it also takes away the habit of belonging to someone. He learns solitude, but sometimes forgets companionship. And the truth is, every man needs someone at some point, not to depend on, but to share life with. A man can survive alone, but he grows when he has someone who sees him, hears him, and stands with him. Too much loneliness doesn't break him, but it can slowly harden him. A man who lives alone too long becomes strong, but sometimes he becomes silent in ways the world never notices. When a man lives alone for too long, silence slowly stops feeling like an empty space and starts becoming a comfortable companion. In the beginning, he may notice the quietness. No footsteps, no voices, no laughter, no questions. But over time, that silence becomes the background music of his life. It shapes his mornings, his evenings, and every moment in between. He wakes up to stillness, moves through his day without interruption, and ends the night with nothing but the sound of his own thoughts. At first, this feels peaceful, a break from chaos, drama, and noise. He feels in control, free from opinions and free from expectations. But gradually, that same peace becomes so normal, so natural, that anything outside of it begins to feel foreign. He becomes used to not hearing anyone call his name. He becomes used to not responding to anyone. He becomes used to conversations existing only in his mind. Silence stops being an absence. It becomes a habit, a rhythm, a comfort zone. And slowly, without even realizing it, noise becomes something he must adjust to rather than something he naturally lives with. People talking loudly, sudden laughter, the simple presence of another person moving around the house. These things begin to feel like disruptions instead of signs of life. He begins avoiding crowded places, long calls, and unnecessary interactions because silence feels safer, easier, predictable. And the more he embraces silence, the more he loses touch with the natural flow of human connection. His mind becomes accustomed to uninterrupted thoughts, and his heart becomes accustomed to not having anyone to share his day with. The silence that once soothed him slowly becomes the environment he depends on, shaping how he communicates, how he reacts, and how he exists in the world. When a man lives alone for too long, independence becomes more than just a skill. It becomes his identity. Every task, every responsibility, every decision rests on his shoulders. He wakes up knowing that if he doesn't do something, it simply won't get done. There is no one to remind him, no one to assist him, and no one to share the load. Over time, this shapes him into someone who relies fully on himself. He learns to cook not just because he wants to, but because he has to. He figures out how to fix minor problems around the house, manages his finances, pays bills on time, and handles emergencies without panicking. He becomes his own support system. This builds a quiet but powerful confidence. He knows he can survive and manage life without depending on anyone. With each passing day, he becomes more capable. He stops waiting for help and starts finding solutions on his own. He develops patience, resilience, and a practical mindset. When challenges come, he doesn't look around to see who can help. He looks within himself. This self-sufficiency strengthens not only his habits, but also his character. He no longer needs validation to make decisions. He buys what he wants, arranges things the way he prefers, and builds routines based on his comfort. He understands his limits, his energy, his strengths. He takes care of his space, and in the process, he learns how to take care of himself emotionally and mentally as well. But with this growing independence, he also gets used to the idea that asking for help is unnecessary or sometimes uncomfortable. He convinces himself that he doesn't need anyone because he has managed everything for so long. The longer he lives alone, the more independence becomes a shield, a way of life, and a standard he holds for himself in every situation. When a man lives alone for too long, his emotional landscape starts to shift in subtle but powerful ways. Without anyone around to ask him how he feels, without conversations that naturally invite sharing, he gradually stops expressing emotions, not because he doesn't feel them, but because he no longer practices releasing them. At first, he might still talk to friends, maybe share something with family, but as solitude becomes his routine, communication becomes shorter, less detailed, less personal. He begins keeping things to himself simply because it's easier. When something bothers him, he deals with it internally. When something excites him, he celebrates quietly. When he feels low, he doesn't verbalize it, he just endures it. Slowly, he becomes so used to handling emotions alone that sharing begins to feel unnecessary. He starts believing that nobody really needs to know how he feels, and eventually he convinces himself that nobody would understand, even if he tried to explain. This quiet emotional suppression becomes his normal. Even his facial expressions change. He smiles less because there's no one to smile with. He laughs less because there's no one to laugh beside. His reactions become muted, controlled, restrained. He becomes emotionally private, not by choice, but by habit. Over time, words he once used freely, like "I'm hurt," "I'm tired," "I'm worried," or "I'm happy," become rare. He speaks more about tasks, goals, responsibilities, and less about feelings. Emotional conversations start making him uncomfortable because they feel unfamiliar, almost foreign. He might experience loneliness, stress, or even joy, but he feels these emotions silently, carrying them without release. And the longer he goes without expressing what's inside, the more difficult it becomes to open up, even when someone trustworthy appears. His emotional world becomes something he guards, something he handles privately, something he rarely, if ever, lets others see. When a man lives alone for too long, he naturally builds a comfort zone so strong, so stable, and so deeply rooted that stepping outside it begins to feel unnecessary, even uncomfortable. This comfort zone isn't just a physical space, it becomes a psychological shield, a personal world designed exactly the way he likes it. His routines become predictable. He wakes up at his chosen time, eats when he wants, sits where he feels comfortable, and spends his evenings exactly the same way day after day. There is no negotiation, no adjustment, no compromise. His life becomes a pattern that flows smoothly because no one interrupts it. Over time, he starts valuing this pattern more than anything else. He arranges his room the way he prefers, sets his own rules, and follows his own timing. This freedom becomes addictive. The idea of someone entering that space, changing things, shifting routines, or asking for time and attention starts to feel like a disturbance rather than companionship. Little things begin to matter. Someone talking too much, moving too loudly, or even sitting in his favorite spot can feel strangely uncomfortable, not because he dislikes people, but because he's become so used to absolute control over his surroundings that any change feels like an intrusion. He gets comfortable eating alone, sleeping alone, watching movies alone, and even handling problems alone. This comfort becomes so strong that social interactions begin to require effort to adjust, effort to respond, effort to share. And because he hasn't practiced this effort in so long, it feels heavier than it should. The comfort zone expands silently. It tells him, you don't need to deal with anyone, you're fine here. and he listens, not realizing how much of himself he is slowly losing to that routine. Eventually, his comfort zone becomes more like a wall, protecting him, yes, but also keeping him from new experiences, new relationships, and new forms of growth. He becomes so accustomed to his own rhythm that blending his life with another person begins to feel like an impossible task, something that demands more energy than he is willing to give. And the longer he stays in that comfort, the harder it becomes to step out or invite someone in. When a man lives alone for too long, he doesn't wake up one day and suddenly become distant. Detachment happens slowly, almost silently, one missed gathering, one ignored call, one postponed plan at a time. Social connections begin to loosen, not because he doesn't care, but because solitude becomes easier than maintaining relationships. He starts reducing conversations without realizing it. Messages that once received quick replies now remain unread for hours or days. Phone calls feel like obligations rather than moments of connection. Even when someone reaches out, his responses become shorter, more practical, less emotional. It's not that he dislikes people, it's simply that human interactions start demanding a level of energy he no longer feels naturally ready to give. Without regular social interaction, his mind adapts to solitude. He becomes comfortable with the idea that he doesn't need to update anyone about his life. He doesn't feel the urge to share what he's doing or what he's going through. He stops expecting others to understand him because he's forgotten the rhythm of being understood. Friendships that once felt vibrant begin to fade. He attends fewer events, avoids unnecessary gatherings, and convinces himself that he is just busy or not in the mood. But the truth is, he has started to drift away from the emotional investment that relationships require. His world becomes smaller. Fewer people, fewer conversations, fewer moments of shared laughter or shared comfort. Family bonds weaken too. He may care deeply, but expressing that care becomes rare. He becomes distant not out of neglect, but out of habit. The longer he lives alone, the more foreign it feels to be surrounded by people, to participate in conversations, or to naturally blend into social circles. Even when he does go out, he feels slightly disconnected, as if he's watching from the outside rather than being part of the group. He becomes an observer instead of a participant. The silence he lives in follows him everywhere. His emotional detachment becomes a shield. He convinces himself that keeping distance protects his peace, protects his space, protects his heart. But in that process, he unknowingly builds a version of himself that struggles to reconnect even when he wants to. The man who once had strong relationships slowly becomes someone who stands at the edge of every gathering, every conversation, every bond, physically present, emotionally distant, silently drifting further away. When a man lives alone for too long, he doesn't just become independent, he becomes guarded. Over time, he builds invisible walls around his heart, not because he wants to push people away, but because solitude has taught him that relying on no one keeps him safe. These walls aren't built overnight, they are constructed slowly, shaped by disappointment, shaped by silence, shaped by the comfort of not needing anyone. He becomes careful with what he shares and who he shares it with. His trust becomes selective, his vulnerability becomes rare, and his emotions become something he manages privately. He learns to keep his problems to himself because he's convinced that opening up will only complicate his life. He believes that people will come and go, but his solitude remains constant. So he places his trust in the one thing that has never abandoned him, being alone. His walls protect him from heartbreak, from judgment, from misunderstanding. They give him control over his emotional world, allowing him to choose who enters and who doesn't. But at the same time, those same walls also block comfort, affection, and genuine connection. He finds it difficult to let people get close because closeness feels like vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like danger. Even when someone tries to care for him, he instinctively keeps a distance. Compliments make him uncomfortable, concern makes him suspicious, and emotional conversations make him guarded. He worries that opening up will expose him, weaken him, or make him dependent, things he has trained himself to avoid for years. These protective walls affect how he communicates. He keeps interactions short, avoids deep topics, and rarely talks about his fears or dreams. He becomes better at hiding his emotions than expressing them. He convinces himself that the safest place for his heart is behind those walls, tucked away where no one can hurt it. Over time, he becomes so used to living inside these emotional boundaries that he forgets what healthy openness feels like. Even when someone genuine enters his life, he struggles to let his guard down. Kindness feels unfamiliar. Attention feels intense. Love feels risky. And the longer he lives behind those walls, the stronger they become, protecting him from pain, but also isolating him from the warmth and connection he might secretly crave. When a man lives alone for too long, he becomes mentally tough in ways most people will never truly understand. Solitude forces him to face challenges alone. Problems, bills, stress, decisions, emergencies, everything rests on him. He becomes the only solution to his own struggles. This sharpens his mind, strengthens his resilience, and teaches him how to stay calm even when life gets heavy. He learns to deal with late-night worries without leaning on anyone. He learns to push through bad days without talking about them. He learns to motivate himself when no one else is there to encourage him. Every hardship becomes a lesson, every mistake becomes a private battle, and every victory becomes a silent achievement. This mental strength makes him capable, grounded, and emotionally stable. But beneath that strength, there is a layer of pain that stays hidden. Pain he doesn't show, pain he doesn't talk about, pain he doesn't even fully acknowledge. He becomes so used to holding himself together that breaking down feels like a weakness he is not allowed to show. Even when he feels overwhelmed, he doesn't have a shoulder to lean on. Instead, he buries the stress deep within and keeps moving, because that's what he has trained himself to do. People around him may see confidence, discipline, and control, but they don't see the nights where he sits alone with thoughts that never leave his mind. They don't see the emotional weight he carries quietly because he doesn't want to burden anyone. He learns to smile even when he is exhausted. He learns to act fine even when he is mentally drained. This hidden pain becomes a part of him, living behind the strong exterior he shows to the world. The longer he lives alone, the better he becomes at suppressing his emotions. He forgets what it feels like to be comforted, supported, or understood. He becomes the kind of man who handles everything, yet secretly wishes someone would ask if he's okay and genuinely mean it. He grows stronger on the outside, but the inner heaviness increases too. He becomes a warrior in silence, fighting battles that no one ever sees, carrying burdens that no one ever helps him lift. And because he never shares this side of himself, the pain remains hidden behind the strength he displays every single day. When a man lives alone for too long, the world sees only one part of him, the strong, disciplined, calm version he has built through years of handling everything on his own. But beneath that hard-earned strength lives a quiet, unspoken weight that becomes heavier with time. Living alone doesn't just make him independent. It trains him to carry emotional burdens that he never shares, that he never releases, and that he often doesn't even admit to himself. He becomes the man who never asks for help. Not because he doesn't need it, but because he has become used to the idea that no one is coming anyway. He learns to solve problems alone, fix things alone, think through dilemmas alone, and even break down alone. What others call resilience, he calls necessity. He has no choice but to be strong, because there is no backup, no support system, no comforting voice telling him it will be okay. Over years of solitude, he becomes incredibly disciplined. He trains his mind to stay calm under pressure because panic helps no one. He becomes the person who can handle unexpected situations without fear. From financial challenges to emotional storms, he learns to hold himself together. This is a strength that people admire, but it is a strength built on countless nights where he pushed himself because there simply was no one else to lean on. But this mental strength comes with a hidden cost. He becomes so used to suppressing his emotions that expressing them feels unnatural. Anger, sadness, anxiety, fear. He pushes them inward instead of letting them out. At first, he does this to stay functional. Later, he does it because he forgets how to do anything else. His mind becomes a storage room for unspoken feelings, stacked quietly in the corners of his heart where no one will ever see them. He starts believing that nobody will understand the battles he fights. So he doesn't talk about them. Not with friends, not with family, not with anyone. He locks the pain inside and keeps walking through life as if everything is perfectly under control. People see him as emotionally stable, but they don't know the cost of that stability. They see him as strong, but they don't see the moments where he sits in silence, overwhelmed by thoughts that have no outlet. They see him as brave, but they don't see the fear he hides: fear of failure, fear of loneliness, fear of emotional collapse. He becomes the man who comforts others but never gets comfort himself. The man who listens to everyone but never speaks about his own problems. The man who carries burdens silently so that no one has to worry about him. He becomes so good at pretending that he's fine that even he starts believing it. He forgets what it feels like to lean on someone. He forgets what it feels like to admit weakness. He forgets what it feels like to have someone who truly understands him. This hidden pain does not show on his face. It hides behind his calm expressions, behind his quiet smile, behind the way he says, "I'm okay," even when he's breaking inside. It hides in the moments when he stares at the ceiling late at night, wondering why he feels so heavy even though nothing is wrong. It hides in the exhaustion he feels at the end of the day, the emotional exhaustion of carrying everything alone. He becomes a master at emotional endurance. He pushes through heartbreak without sharing it. He handles disappointment without talking about it. He faces loneliness without admitting it. And because he's so strong outwardly, nobody ever suspects the depth of what he carries internally. Everyone assumes he is fine because he always shows up, always manages, always survives. But mental strength is not the same as emotional fulfillment. He grows tough because he has to. He hides pain because he feels he must. He becomes silent because solitude taught him that silence is safer than vulnerability. Sometimes he wishes someone would ask him, not casually, but sincerely, if he is truly okay. Not because he wants pity, but because he wants to feel seen. He wants someone to notice the cracks beneath the strength. He wants someone to understand that even the strongest men carry loads that wear them down quietly. He dreams of a day when he doesn't have to be the strong one all the time. A day when he can open up without fear. A day when he can express emotions without feeling weak. A day when he can let someone hold the pain with him instead of holding it alone. But until that day arrives, he continues building strength on the outside while quietly collecting pain on the inside. He walks through life with a steady face and a heavy heart, balancing his responsibilities with the silent battles that no one knows about. The world applauds his strength, but the world never sees the price he pays for it. And the longer he lives alone, the thicker this emotional armor becomes. It protects him from hurt, yes, but it also isolates him from healing. It keeps him strong, but it also keeps him lonely. It keeps him stable, but it also keeps him silent. His mind becomes both his shield and his prison. His strength becomes both his power and his burden. His hidden pain becomes both his secret and his constant companion. He becomes the man who can stand through every storm, but quietly hopes for someone who will understand the storms happening inside him. When a man lives alone for too long, something unexpected happens. Love, affection, and genuine care, things that should feel warm and comforting, begin to feel unfamiliar, intense, even overwhelming. Not because he doesn't want love, and not because he is incapable of feeling it, but because he has lived so long without it that he forgets how to receive it. He becomes used to doing everything by himself, relying on himself, solving problems alone, and carrying emotions privately. This independence shapes him into someone who feels safest when he is not depending on anyone. Over time, he builds a life where he expects nothing from others, asks for nothing, and shares very little. His world becomes structured in a way where emotional support is not part of the system he lives in. So when someone finally steps into his life with genuine care, someone who asks how he's doing, someone who listens, someone who notices the small things, he doesn't know how to react. His first instinct is not to welcome it, but to question it. Why are they being so nice? What do they want? What if I open up and they leave? These questions aren't signs of distrust toward others. They're signs of how deeply solitude has shaped him. Acts of kindness, which feel normal to most people, feel intense to him. A simple gesture, like someone cooking for him, checking on him, or showing concern can make him feel exposed. He's not used to being cared for, so even gentle affection touches emotional spaces he hasn't opened in years. He may pull back without meaning to. He may seem distant even if he's interested. He may reject help even when he needs it. He may appear cold when he's actually scared. Because to accept care means letting someone enter the private world he has protected for so long. It means allowing vulnerability, showing emotions, revealing weaknesses, things he has avoided out of habit, not out of choice. When someone tries to love him, he feels pressure he can't explain. Not pressure from the person, but pressure from within himself. He fears disappointing them. He fears not knowing how to express affection in return. He fears that he has forgotten how to be someone's partner. He fears he might not be enough. Or he fears he might care too much and get hurt. Living alone for years teaches him survival, discipline, and strength, but it does not teach him how to receive softness. It does not teach him how to accept a warm hug without stiffening. It does not teach him how to share his fears without hesitation. It does not teach him how to let someone take care of him without feeling guilty or uncomfortable. So love becomes a challenge, not because he doesn't want it, but because he is out of practice. Affection becomes complicated, not because he's heartless, but because he has lived without it for so long that it feels foreign. He deeply desires connection, but he no longer knows how to invite it into his life. He longs for someone who understands him, yet he hides his heart behind walls he doesn't know how to lower. He craves companionship, yet he fears the vulnerability it demands. And the longer he lives alone, the more this difficulty grows. Love feels like something he must learn again, slowly, carefully, patiently, because the world he built in solitude never taught him how to let someone stay. In the end, living alone for too long shapes a man in ways the world rarely notices. He becomes strong, disciplined, and self-reliant, a man capable of surviving any challenge. Yet in that strength lies a hidden cost, emotional distance, guarded walls, and a quiet loneliness that only he truly understands. Solitude teaches him resilience, but it also teaches him detachment. Independence brings pride, but it can also bring isolation. The truth is, every man, no matter how strong, needs connection. He needs someone to share his victories with, someone to lighten his burdens, someone to witness his inner world without judgment. Living alone may build strength, but it cannot replace the warmth of companionship, the comfort of care, and the healing that comes from being truly seen. A man who has lived alone too long may stand tall, but the real growth comes when he learns to let someone in, when he allows love, friendship, and care to soften the edges that solitude has hardened. It is in balance between independence and connection, between strength and vulnerability, that he truly thrives.